All right, so like I said, we're going to talk about tessellating today. And so your first part of the project is, making the design, choosing systems that fit into uh, the specifics of the different systems you chose. But then ultimately, we're going to take those systems and tessellate them into a mask-like shape. The mask form that you create should reinforce the idea of identity. Okay, so you're hopefully making choices within the color systems. The colors you're choosing in the systems will also reinforce that idea of identity, the concept. So we just keep compounding that reference to the conceptual problem that you have. And so on the tessellation I have here on the left of the screen, I am start to make that mask-like form. I'm using three different color systems. You can use as many or as limited to one system as you'd like in your tessellation. That is up to you. Um, so again, you decide what's necessary. The content here, I'm dealing with like gun violence, and so there's a lot of hard edges and a lot of contrast between the colors that I'm using. So I want to try to keep that sort of visual effect happening. So I'm going to kind of focus on maybe having a lot of angles, a lot of points, and then even high contrast between the color choices I'm using. So that's why, like in the bottom part would be, I guess, like the teeth or mouth-like area, I'm having blue against the warm colors, right? So I have warm and cool colors kind of conflicting against each other. So those are kind of decisions I would like you to be thinking about when you get to the tessellation part, okay? Um, so I'm going to start by starting with a blank sheet, okay? So you should all have your designs essentially done here. And I'm going to turn off the asymmetrical design here. So you're going to have your systems. You should have them completed. And at this point, we're going to start to think about the tessellation mask. Now, you're ultimately going to be cutting out the designs and gluing them to foam core. The foam core comes in two different values, comes in black and white. And then you can also have two different sizes. The black and white will come 30 by 40. It also comes 20 by 30 in white. So it's a bit smaller. Now, you can buy what you need after you're done here, okay? You're going to design your tessellation on the computer. So you'll have time to manipulate it. Think of this as like your sketchbook part, where you're going to go through and sort of figure out what that tessellation should look like before you actually start printing. At the end of the video here, or the demonstration here, we'll talk about going from the tessellation that you've designed to the printing part, okay? So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a new document that is going to represent the foam core. And you can do this with me, you go ahead and follow. So file, new, and when I get into this file here, eventually, here, I wanna make the width, I'm gonna make it the big size of foam core, so I'm gonna do a width of 30, and then the height 40. Make sure that it's in inches right here. And then make sure the resolution is 360. And I'm just going to go ahead and leave the background white as it's a white piece of foam core. You could ultimately change the foam core to black. You can also, we will discuss cutting the foam core. You could actually cut the foam core down to the shape of your mask so that it's not like on a board, the rectangular board. That'll be up to you. So I'm going to create, and now I just have a white document, and this is where I'm going to make my tessellations. All right, and we're going to use the free transform tool for doing most of our changing and manipulating the rhombus shape to tessellate. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drag one as like sort of like a base for the maybe the face shape or something. So I'm gonna come back over to this file, and I have already have my um, designs here flattened into rhombus shapes. So if you have like, so here, this whole one layer is the whole rhombus shape. And so again, I just selected the two equilateral triangles that made this and then merged the layers to make it one. So this is how you would merge those two layers. So you'd get one. This makes this part so much easier if you have the rhombus as one individual layer. So I'm going to take this monochromatic layer, and I'm just going to take it from my layer palette, drag it over to that new document. I'll hold the shift key down, going to place it right in the middle. So now I have one layer here ready to start manipulating. And now I could easily go back to this file and drag it from here to this file, or I can just stay on this file here, the tessellated one, drag that layer down to the new layer icon at the bottom next to the trash can, and it makes a copy of it. So now I can have two, and I can just use the move tool and slide this over, and I'm going to want to keep edges or points touching. So when I drag this over, it snaps right to that edge here, and I'm going to zoom in so it's easy to see. It snaps right here because, again, under View, Snap to, I have it on layers. So once this drags over and it snaps to that edge, I'm going to then go to my Edit, Free Transform, and in my bounding box, I have an anchor point in the middle. And this is the anchor point that the layer will pivot on. I'm going to undo that because what I'm going to do to restrict how it rotates is I'm going to move the pivot point to this corner, which happens to be right in the middle of that segment. So I'm dragging it right here, and now it's going to, let me go back. Now it's going to rotate on that corner edge. Now, because it's a rhombus shape, I can go into the options for my free transform tool at the top here, and I can specifically tell the action how much to rotate it by angles. And I'm going to go 60 because that will rotate it the perfect amount so that the edges line up here. So I'm going to hit OK, and it looks like there's a line here, and I can always zoom in to see if there is indeed a line, and if it is, then what I'll do is while this layer is selected, I'll use the move tool and my arrow keys just sort of to nudge this and move it over 1 pixel at a time until that completely lines up. All right, and so now at this point, I can zoom back out and I'll zoom a little bit in so that I have two done. So now I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm just gonna go down to this one here. To make this easy, I'll click this, drag that down, make a copy of it again, drag it over here till it lines up there, edit, free transform, move that pivot point back to here, and this time it's going to be like a -60. So you can start see as I rotate it changes up here. So I'll just select that and hit 60 in, confirm it. I will likely need to move it and nudge it like I did the last one. So I'm just going to move it up. Again, move tool. There. And so now when I zoom out, I have a hexagon for my 3 rhombus designs. And so now I'm starting to formulate this shape. Now, as I move forward, I might want to rotate this whole thing. Like maybe I want it to be turned about, what is it, about 60 degrees, the whole thing. So what I'm going to do that is as I start to tessellate the design, I'm going to have a minimum of 6 layers. Right? You have to use 6 rhombus shapes in your tessellation. So I'm going to start stacking up lots of different layers in my layers palette here. And just to be a little bit cleaner when looking at my layers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a grouping, right? And so this is my monochromatic rhombuses. So what I'll do is I'm going to go down to the layers palette and make a group folder. And then I'm just going to place all these layers right in the group folder. And when I do that, I can uncollapse that. They're all grouped together like this. And since they're all grouped together and they're all visible, and the group is highlighted, I can now go into my free transform, and I can manipulate all of them at the same time. And so now I just turn it a little bit, again, with 30 degrees, -30 degrees, what I want here. So I want it to be this sort of orientation, all right, visually for my mask-like form. I can start thinking like, Are these going to maybe start to be the basis for eyes or something over here? And then I'll start growing out the shape. So again, how you want to start designing this tessellation is up to you. I'm going to confirm this and fit the screen because now I'm ready to start bringing in other rhombus shapes. And so we've rotated them. Now I'm going to talk about shrinking and enlarging the different rhombus shapes for this. So the first one I think I'll use over here is a complementary one. So it's here. Yep. I'm going to drag this one over. It doesn't really matter because it'll snap to wherever I need it to be. All right, I can edge right to the edge here. But what I'm going to make this, I'm going to enlarge this, maybe make it maybe twice as large as what this is originally going to be. So edit, free transform, and just like up here where I could be specific with the angles, I have the Y or the width and the height here, and it's 100%, and there's a link here, and the link should be turned on. If it's turned on, what I do to the width is applicable to the height as well. All right, so it will uniformly change this. And so I can move this around and position it where I want it. I want it to line up here at the bottom, and then hit confirm. But I can always change the layer order. So I can change the layer order by putting that group underneath it, behind it, in front of. At this point, I might want to add more of that same system. So I'm going to come over here and grab this and maybe start thinking about rotating it a little bit, maybe making them half the scale too. So I'm going to take this one, do half scale. I'm going to confirm it, and I'm going to zoom in just so I can position it. A little bit too much. I think I want to do is I want to turn this so it's a little bit aligned here. So again, free transform, change the pivot. I'm going to confirm that. And then another trick that I can do is if I duplicate this one, just dragging this down, something like this, and I have these positioned on the right side, but I want to mirror it on the left side. What I'll do is I'll highlight both of them by clicking Shift, so they're both highlighted. And instead of having to do this again, drag them over and merge them down, I'll just copy these two layers once they're highlighted. And then there's the copies of those two. I can go to edit, just like you mirrored your images, I'll flip it horizontally. And then just drag them over here. So now it's a mirrored image. So I can easily think about this as like dividing a line up here, and what I do on the right side, I can just mirror those file layers and pull them over here. And now I can start having start to build onto this tessellation. The other thing that I can do is if I want to maybe pull out another one of these, and if I free transform it, one more free transform option is that if I hold the shift key down, I can distort this. All right. And not everything needs to line up. They all don't have to line up when you make your tessellations. So I'm going to confirm this one, although I'm going to move this one to the back so it's behind that. And then again, I can just copy that, drag it over here. So it snaps in. And so then I can start building this up, into the shape of the mask that I want to take. Now, again, we're ultimately printing these out. Now, in the past, what we would do for printing these out is I would have you typically cut out each individual rhombus shape for your tessellation and then glue each one down. We're not going to do that, all right, because that's more work in gluing. But so what I'm going to have you do is you're going to compose your composition here and then decide like what groupings will fit on a piece of paper. So you might be able to have, uh, 4 or 5 different rhombuses working, or rhombi, whichever how you want to say it plural, working on one sheet of paper. So at this point, once you have your tessellation sort of formulated here, I'm going to stop here and then I'm going to make a new document. So I'm going to go back to making a new document that is the size of the piece of paper that you'll be printing on. Now you should all have 13 by 19 paper. If you haven't taken back the old paper back to return it and get the 13 by 19, do so. So width will be 13 on the new document, height 19, and then 360 resolution, hit create. Now, depending on the height of the mask or tessellation you're making, the whole thing is likely not going to fit on one sheet of paper. You're going to have to break it down. You're also going to have to think about, well, if I have this large one in the background, that maybe I need to put that one down first, and then this monochromatic grouping here, I'll have to glue this big rhombus down and then glue this tessellated, these three together as one separate thing. They may fit together, but they can also most certainly be glued right on top of something. You start layering your your tessellations here. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to try and see if I can get this layer and that layer on one sheet of paper. It should fit, I think, the height wise. So I'm going to select both of these layers, shift key again, and then I'm going to drag them to this new piece of paper that represents their printed page. Hold the shift key so it's right in the middle, and it does. They both fit. Right? Now, if it gets bigger, your tessellation gets larger, then it's not going to fit, and you might have to do it in piecemeal, right? You're going to have to separate them out. Now, definitely, these ones on the left and the right, they're not going to fit over here. They get cropped out. So I'm going to have to do those things separately. And so I have some empty space up here. If I'm going to do these elongated ones separately, well, one of the things I could do is I could come over here and find these, drag them over here to this file, and see if they fit, which they do. All right, so if they're the same, if they're just vertical, which these two are, they're exactly the same, just moved separate. I can copy it, put the other one over here, and so one printout page could look like this. So ideally what I want you to do is over the weekend and for Monday is to tessellate and print out your pages. We're going to start cutting and gluing things down, talking about the foam core, cutting the foam core, and managing foam core on Monday in class, which means the project is going to do Wednesday instead of Monday. All right, so we're moving that back a little bit so that we have more time to focus on the tessellation and getting that just right. All right, and so when looking at this, this is what you should be having done for the weekend, where I can print this out, and you're going to print it just like you printed the other files. Just there's going to be color this time, right? Because you desaturated the other ones. The printing process is the same, paper is the same printer, and then for these other two over here, these two over here, I need to print those. I'm going to have to print a new sheet. So I'll either make a new sheet here, or I can group all of these into sort of like one printed group, turn that off. So I'd turn that on, that'd be one group I would print. And then I could come over into this layer and grab these 4 layers and print these ones separate. All right, but I'd have to move them together. All right, so I'd have to print that separately, cut those out, and then glue them down later. So you're essentially going to have to separate and see how you can be the most efficient with your paper and the cutting out. All right, this I still want there to be a conscious effort to be as clean and precise as possible when cutting these out. If you have pieces like this that are supposed to fit into the edge and line up with other rhombus shapes, if you don't cut it out properly, they're not going to line up right, okay? The benefit of printing them out in large groups is like here, well, some of these, like um, this grouping here, right? These 3, I don't have to cut all E3 of them out individually. I can just cut out that one hexagon shape, and then I'm set to go. Okay, so that way you don't have to worry about cutting out 3 different rhombi and then lining them up perfectly. So think about design, think about how you can be efficient with the printing part and then reassembling it after it's printed out. The other thing is once you start, if they're separate, and you start layering them, that's going to build up like a almost like a shadow, and it's going to build up mass to it. So that could be interesting. It could be another added effect to how we interact with it. Whereas if I print uh, this part as one whole, then there's not going to be like a line underneath here where that's going to be, because I would be printing, that separately, gluing it down, and then printing this out on top of it. And so there could be things that you manipulate in that building up the layering that you could manipulate even further of your mask and building up actual texture instead of just sort of really smooth flat. So again, that's up to you on how you start to compose this.